Okay, first of all, if you clicked on this video, if you're watching it, thank you. This is not an easy topic for a lot of people to talk about, but personally I feel it's a very important conversation for us to be able to have as a community. Death is the one thing that we all share in common here as humans, relative to our own personal experience and also to the relationship that we have with others. Now, within this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about my own personal experience relative to right now at the time of this video, in relationship to the fact that my grandmother, the last of my grandparents, is dying. She is in palliative care, and it is only a matter of possibly unlikely weeks, days, and maybe even hours until her time comes. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about my own personal experience, as well as a bit about what death means to me, what some of my ideas on it are, as well as how I choose to deal with it, how I choose to cope with it, and how I choose to move beyond it, ultimately towards perceptions of hope and deeper compassion and love for life in general. So to begin, what is death? That is an excellent question, and that in itself is a mystery for a lot of people. Obviously, it's a very subjective thing. And so in that sense, really all I can do is share with you some of my own personal beliefs, ideas, perspectives, and in some ways experience as to what death is. One of the best ways that I've ever heard death explained is the idea of thinking of it as taking off a tight boot. In that understanding, it's the idea of realizing that the body that we exist within, this physical experience, is but a vehicle, is but a shell to who we actually are beyond this physical dimension. And that's where you get into the idea of soul. And so in that sense, as many of you have already begun piecing together from your own perspectives, when we die, we continue living, but it's merely in a different state. It's in a different dimension, so to speak. And so in that sense, death isn't necessarily always something to be feared and to be scared of and to mourn, though those are all valid emotions and experiences. It is also something that can be perceived as something to celebrate, because from the higher perspective, it's understanding that it is a continued part of a soul's journey, and the fact that the soul existed here within the physical body was only just a part of the bigger experience that soul is still on. And so in many ways, part of how I understand death is being able to relate it to an understanding of the dream space. Once we start realizing that the two are intimately connected, it helps us understand a little bit more as to what we could possibly begin to expect when death happens, not only to ourselves, but also to our loved ones. And in this sense, it's being able to understand that following the process of death, it is very much almost like the soul going through a stargate, so to speak. And that's where you get into the whole idea of like the pineal gland activating at death, and also again during birth and dreams as well. Theoretically, yet in many cases, it's an easy dot to be able to connect. And so in that sense, it's being able to understand that when the soul experiences death, it's almost very much like entering into a dream state. And within that dream state, they can experience life outside of this physical dimension, outside of the limitations of what we perceive to be time and space. And yet they are still able to experience present moments equally vivid and real as this one right now. And that's where you get into the idea of what is heaven, what is the afterlife. And in many ways, it is a returning to a place from which we came. And again, before we were born, and every night when we dream, and every night and when we die, it is very much a process of our soul, so to speak, that aspect of our consciousness returning to the astral planes, returning to these etheric realms, these higher dimensions, if you want to think of it that way. And one of the things that's really interesting about this is understanding that even though after death, we may lose the physical connection with that person or that being, in many ways, the soul continues to exist, and they still can be communicated with. They still can have a relationship with the physical realm. And again, this is a very subjective thing. What do you think about this? But this is where you get into the idea of after death, the soul can continue to be involved. They can continue to be a part of your story. They can become an intuitive voice. They can tap into your heart space and they can speak to you through there. They can speak to you through your dreams. There can be a continued relationship and conversation. In many ways, we think about the idea of how at the time of death, if a person is on their hospital bed and they've been bed stricken and that's their experience, there's only so much that they can do from a hospital bed or wherever they may be. Yet once they have passed on, once they have moved into that other state as a consciousness, as pure energy, as that into the realm beyond this one, that is still a part of this one, very much so, it allows them to be able to continue to communicate. It allows them to continue to interact. It allows them in many ways to do more than what they could just from being theoretically in a hospital bed. And this is where, again, you get into the idea of guardian angels. And so, as much as it is that my grandmother will be passing soon, it is also kind of this opening up to a new understanding of our relationship that's like, okay, grandma is still here. She is still not only with me, but she is still with us. And though it's hard for us to be able to really know for certain, it's just like, oh, is she still watching? Is she still there? That's where you really tap into the heart wisdom and that intuitive sense of knowledge that we are all connected to. And again, this is a very subjective thing. I can't tell you to believe this, but in your heart, you will know what's true for you. And from my own personal experience, it is very much so absolutely true that every soul that has died, in particular family members and those who we have been close with in this lifetime, continue to engage and continue to develop a relationship with us as we continue to live here on the earth plane. And like I said, sometimes that can come through in dreams, sometimes that can come through in our intuition, sometimes that can come through in synchronicities. Just think of those moments where you're thinking of a loved one who's passed, and then your favorite song happens to come on the radio, and it's just like, oh, what's going on here? That's so peculiar. That's so beautiful in its own way. And that, in the same way that the universe can communicate through all beings through the nature of synchronicity and language and symbols, it's another chance for, in some ways, that degree of the soul, which is a connected aspect of all souls, to be able to communicate to us. And yet, when we are open to that, when we are more open to this, it allows these experiences to come through to us in ways in which we are able to develop that form of communication. So it's up to us to continue to develop that relationship, to continue to allow that communication to continue. And again, for some people, they might just think that, and they might just feel that this is right for them, that when the body dies, when maybe the concept of a soul is secondary, that's it, that's the end. And that's the conversation ends and it lives on through memories. But for other people, it's just, no, okay, this is just continuing the relationship in a different form and being able to continue to share that journey. And so in that sense, our friends, our families, our elders are still with us. In many ways, they continue to live on through us. They continue to live on through the love that we share in that sense. So in relationship to my own grandmother passing, it is a sad thing, and it is something that we mourn in many ways, and there's nothing wrong with that. You're allowed to have mixed emotions when it comes to death. You're allowed to mourn, you're allowed to be sad, and you're also allowed to be happy, and you're also allowed to feel relief. And sometimes this is hard for some people because they get into the idea of feeling grief. They feel guilty about having relief or happiness, but that really comes from your own personal relationship with death. And sometimes, for the people who have been caring for a loved one, and when the time comes when they pass, it's understandable that they can feel a relief because it can be very straining on the family as well. And it's just like, okay, it's over, on to the next thing type thing. And that's okay. That's a valid experience if that's relative to the circumstance that may be taking place at the time. And so for me, over the weekend, I got to visit my grandmother, and what could be the very last time that I at least get to be able to visit her in that state where she was relatively conscious, she was semi there, and we were able to have some forms of communication. And for me, when I went there, you know, I was just sitting at her bed. I was playing some classical music for her, all just like through music. And I was even doing some guided meditations with her. And I was just holding her hand. You know, I was kind of like walking her to a beach and, you know, telling her, I'm like, oh, can you feel like the water on your toes? And she's like, oh, it feels nice and crisp. And, you know, so in that sense, it was really just about being able to be there, support, allow them to feel comfortable, and remind them that they are loved. You know, allow them to be able to transition through that process of death from the perspective of really being able to see it as a ceremony. You know, and this is the same way I dealt with it when my dog Shelby passed away. I very much thought of it as a ceremony in that sense, and in that sense, like as a partner for him, like I was like helping him. You know, I was helping him through what is in many cases a psychedelic experience, a psychedelic ceremony. And again, I use the term psychedelic in terms of that, like opening up to that godness, being able to see the godness in a very present way. And again, you know, at death, when you get into the ideas of DMT being released into the brain at death, like it's part of like a transitioning process. And so at death, like people hear people talking about the white light and everything, and that's very much, you know, an aspect of the veil, the filters being pulled back, and the soul kind of beginning to transition and beginning to see like the illusion of this reality dissolve as you open up into like the realms beyond this and the all that is. And so that's a very beautiful experience. And as family and as a friends, you know, I think just being able to help hold space for that is something incredibly valuable. And so for one of the ways that and again, thank you for watching this video. I know it might be lengthy, but I want to be able to continue to just talk a little bit more about this. So one of the ways that I have learned to be able to cope with dealing with death is through being able to use a physical object that I can use to be able to connect with the energy of that person. And so, for example, I've been holding this the entire video. This is a crystal, an Oralite 23 crystal that I had, and throughout the years I've given my grandmother like several different crystal wraps over the years. And so this was one that I picked out before I went to the hospital last time, and you know, I wanted to be able to share it with her. And so I was like holding on to it while holding her hand. And even in the moment, and you know, I kind of like, part of me is like, oh, do I regret this or whatever? But it was, again, just kind of like pending on her state. And I think I did tell her anyways. But, you know, I told her, I'm like, oh, you know, like I have this with you. Or even if I didn't verbally say it, I was still like communicating it. And so like holding her hand with this in my hand, it was me kind of like creating that energy exchange. And then through this, her energy becomes a part of this crystal because it reflects the intention of it. And then I keep it with me. And then when I'm holding on to it, it allows me to be able to connect with her essence, with her soul, with her memories, with her thoughts. And so for me, like, you know, when the time comes when she has passed on, this crystal will remain with me as a token, as a trinket, as an icon of my connection that I still have with her. And I've done this with, you know, I did this with my dog Shelby as well. And you know, I invite other people to do this as well, to be able to have like a physical item that you can sort of designate as being something that you go to, something that you meditate with, that still allows you to commune with the energy and with the spirit of whoever it is that you're choosing to commune with. And so another example would be, in particular with my dog Shelby, going back to this because this is still like a part of my everyday life. When I go out and I walk my other dog Dallin currently around the block, there's a tree that we always go to that I've designated as the Shelby Tree. And so this tree was where Shelby, he would always, you know, one of the trees where he would pee on and things like that. And so when I go for walks, like I always go there and I'll take a few moments and I'll literally hug this tree. And I'll just take a few moments to either kind of like open up my intuition to kind of allow any messages to come through, or to be able to communicate a message to Shelby, kind of still inviting him into my space as a guardian, as a spirit, as a watcher, as a guardian angel, in that sense. And so, you know, like the wisdom that he had continues to live on. And so, you know, for my grandmother and for all of the friends and family that I have known who have passed on, and quite frankly, in this year, there have been several deaths that I've experienced relative to like close friends, older people who have been elders and everything. And I know that, you know, for them, they were fascinated with death, and by being able to continuously live our life and to be able to live our love, it's doing so like in commemoration of them. It's doing so in memory of them. And so, my grandmother, she was a very gentle spirit. And, someone who, like, when I look at her, when I'm sitting at her bed, I'm like, she's not just my grandmother. She's literally like a fractal of me. She's an extension of me. And so even from my grandmother, whose name is Ray Alderton, for her, she's very openly accepting that this is her time. And in many ways, she's allowed herself to be at an extreme amount of peace with it. And part of that, whether or not I know, but, my grandfather passed away many years ago, so I'm sure perhaps in the back of her mind, she's in some ways opening her heart to the idea that this will be a chance for her to be reunited with the love of her life, my grandfather, Harvey. And so in that sense, I think it's very beautiful to be able to acknowledge that that is very much a real part of her story at this moment. And again, just being able to hold space for that is the most we can do, and be understanding, and to just have our love for her and for everyone. And so she lives on again through my journey, through my aspirations, through the fulfillment of my dreams, through my own trials and tribulations, and knowing that, she'll still be with me. And then when the time comes when, I in some form permanently leave this realm, at the time that I die, like, believe it or not, like, I'm going to die at some point. And, even the idea of being able to reflect on our own death, our own mortality, there's a very powerful thought process there. But, like, when the time comes for that, like, I'll still be able to be connected with her. And that's kind of the beauty of this all, is that we live in this constant state of illusion, and we need to believe that things are finite, or at least understand that things do have like a transient process within this physical dimension, because it allows us to appreciate them even more. And death is a beautiful part of life. Like, death is life in an essential process. And so, for my grandmother, like, bless her soul, like, a part of her theoretically, like, watching this video from a hyperdelic perspective, like, thank you for teaching us, for raising my mother and her sisters, and for raising us as your grandchildren, and for all the love that you share and the memories you've given us. And again, like, a part of me will cry about this later. Right now, I'm kind of in a different state. And, I'm happy. I'm happy that she's peaceful. And as weird as it sounds, like, I wish her all the best on her continued journey as a soul, and wherever that may lead her. And so again, that's moving into the conclusion of this video. That's just some of the perspectives I have on death, is being able to understand, not just from reading books, not just from other people telling me, but from my own intuition, from my own internal relationship with death, of knowing it as not the end. It's the end of perhaps a chapter, but it's not the end of a story. And just being able to be open to the idea of how can we continue the relationship with people who have passed on beyond the physical, whether it be again through like tokens, whether it be through meditation, whether it be through intentional dream practices, when you can go into your dreams and like call in a relationship with these spirits. There's many ways to do it, and I invite you to be able to share in the comments, or what are some of the ways that you cope with death, that you allow yourself to grieve. And just reminding ourselves that when it comes to these experiences, allow the emotions to flow through. There's no shame in like feeling as if you're not allowed to cry. Like, it's part of the experience, and the fact that you feel sad just means the fact that you have loved deeply, and that you continue to love deeply, and that's a very powerful thing. And so I thank you for doing that. I thank you for your vulnerability and your strength. And essentially, that is one of the things that death will teach us. And so death will teach us how strong we are, how deeply compassionate we are as humans, the ability to continue on, the ability to walk each other home in that sense, knowing that it happens to all of us. It's inescapable. And it is not always something to be scared of, but it is something to be in awe of. And there's still a lot of mystery to it, and so keep asking questions about that. Have these conversations. They're important. I think having death as a taboo in some ways is what creates the fear. And when we have these conversations, it helps distill it, and it allows us to move into these deeper places of compassion. And again, also to be able to come out of it as hope, to be able to have hope coming out of it, and then to be able to help assist others through their own process as well. So just hold on to those memories, the memories that you choose to hold on to, those will continue to be with you. And keep going forward and keep making new memories. And that's the way life is, you know, from one cycle to the next, from one dream to the next, it continues on. And that is what we came here to experience. And that's the beauty of it, the full spectrum of it. So thank you so much for watching this video, as long as it is. I appreciate you tuning in. And please feel free to leave any thoughts and comments as to what death means to you. What do you think happens to us after we die? And what some of your coping mechanisms are with death, be it through humans, again, you know, be it through people, be it through even animals, in that sense, because it's all relative. It's all a valuable experience. So I feel like there's like a lot more that I could keep talking about this, but I think that summarizes my main thoughts on it. And again, I hope this video, through me sharing my own thoughts, allows you to just continue to open your heart to allow death to be able to not be something to always be scared of, but rather something to be able to have a deeper appreciation for, and to see the lessons in it, and to allow it to expand our perception of what life is. And so, you know, what happens after we die, we keep living. So thank you for watching this video, and as always, you can check out links below for more videos, and you can support how you choose, and just watching this video is a great way to support. So I appreciate you holding this space for me, and please feel free to send any prayers to my family, to my grandmother. It's always appreciated, and sending prayers right back to you for whatever you're going through. So thank you, and much love. I'll see you in the future.